Hi, Kristina, and welcome. Thanks so much for giving time to chat to us today. I wonder if you just start by just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. I can introduce myself briefly. My name is Kristina Arakelyan. I'm a composer and pianist, and I also work as a teacher as well. I'm very passionate about education. I think that everyone who has music lessons should really enjoy them and should love what they're performing. And I have a portfolio career, which I know we will discuss a little bit later. I work as a pianist. I do a lot of accompanying. Quite a lot of that is for ABRSM exams, and I also I perform my own compositions as well as other people's compositions. As a composer, I write for different ensembles, different types of combinations of instruments. But I have a special interest in writing for the piano, which is my own instrument, and also writing for voices. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of my teaching portfolio as well.
That's great. Now, we know from our work with you already, Kristina, that you have a very busy and active portfolio. Every time we try and speak to you, as always, we find you, but you're always in a different location, teaching, making, playing, composing. Part of these films are about introducing more and more people to what it is to be a composer. How do you get started and what does it mean? So tell us a little bit about your journey as a composer. How did it begin? And something about how it's progressed.
Yes, and I think what's quite great about this series is that we're talking very candidly about what it is to be a composer. And I come from a non-musical family, so being a musician was never sort of something that was imposed on me in any way. It really did come from love for music that I had from a young age, and from just incidentally kind of walking into a piano lesson with a friend, and in a piano club in the school, a primary school that I was in. And starting as a composer, I didn't realize that I am a composer. I just quite like to improvise as a piano student. And instead of practicing my scales, I would sit there and try out different combinations of notes on the instrument without really knowing what they are. For example, I discovered the whole tone scale without realizing it is the whole tone scale. Yeah. And it just came from just kind of experimenting and finding new interesting sounds, which led to my family sort of inquiring about composition lessons, and I started learning. Learning both as a pianist and composer at the school I was in back in Armenia, where I'm originally from.
I really like that idea of us thinking about what it is to be a composer, and you just said now, playing your words back, I didn't realize what I was doing was composing, and playing around with music, improvising, experimenting is as valid, I guess, as writing it down on a score and recording it. Am I right in that?
Absolutely, and I think that that's a big part of what it is to compose, because I think ultimately it's about being curious and about using your existing experiences as a musician to try and create something that just expresses perhaps an emotion that you have at that point. And we don't have to formally define necessarily at what point something becomes a composition. For me personally, it is about connecting with people and expressing myself, but it can mean all sorts of things to different people.
Good. And just out, this is one of those questions I guess you might have been asked before or not, but I'm going to go for it, which is about, how would we know we're listening to your music, Kristina? When you compose and express yourself and your beliefs in what it is to be a musician and your message, how would we recognize your music? What's your thumbprint?
Well, I would, it's quite difficult to describe my own music, but I would say it is often quite lyrical. And I'm quite interested in exploring modes. So I would say modal lyrical. I'm very much influenced by very different types of music that I've experienced and connected with, ranging from Bach, who is my ultimate inspiration, to early 20th century music, composers such as Stravinsky and Bartók, and also Messiaen, later 20th century composers. So I would say it's a mix of all of my inspirations. And amid all of that, I try to stay true to whatever comes to my mind on a given day.
It's interesting as you start to name check some of those, Bach, your hero, and Stravinsky, Messiaen. there's something there about, I guess, unpacking and discovering those composers is part of learning about what it is to be a composer, you know. And I mean, is one of the things maybe for anyone watching and listening to this who's thinking, I could do that, to be curious about the music that they're performing, work out, how does it work? How does it work? How did it tick along?
I think that is exactly the process for me personally, because as I said, I came from the background of being a pianist. So it was definitely about performing music and analyzing it, and then trying to create something, modeling it on existing compositions. And out of that emerges your own voice after a period of time, I would say.
One of the things I think, if I squarely talk on behalf of ABRSM, we're very keen to encourage anyone who's performing a piece from our syllabus, and I like the word curious, I like the idea of being curious, to be curious about who wrote it, how it works, what key it's in, how the time signatures interrelate. Is there anything else that that composer's written that they might like to explore? Because one piece, it's got a whole world, a whole kind of mix of tendrils and tentacles that you can go off and explore.
Absolutely. And I try to encourage my own students to do that. And we often look at the structure of the music and try to find a narrative within the music itself. I find that my younger students quite like that, when we have a little story to the music, and it really focuses us, doesn't it? Makes you, as you're saying, our keyword, more curious about the context in which the music was written and how to interpret it.
More curiosity for everyone. Great. And I wonder, just having said it right at the top of this conversation, you're busy and you've got lots going on. What are you working on at the moment? What are the projects that you've got commissioned, or you've got bubbling away in your mind, or we might even be hearing on a stage at some point?
So I've recently just finished a few compositions. One of them is for the BBC Singers, and it is a composition. It is a reaction to Benjamin Britten's The Four Sea Interludes, sort of companion music to the Four Sea Interludes. I'm very, very honoured to be a part of this project, having grown up with Britten's music and absolutely admiring this specific composition and the opera. And this will be performed next month in October 2021 at Temple Church, along with Anna Lapwood's transcriptions of the mentioned work. In addition to that, I've been working with the National Youth Choirs of Great Britain, and I've just finished writing a piece for the National Youth Choir, as well as for the Fellows Choir, who are my colleagues. We are all part of a fellowship scheme together. In addition to that, I'm working on my PhD portfolio as a PhD student at King's College London. I'm just entering my final year as a PhD student. And I've just completed a composition for the organ, which was included in an anthology of female composers' organ music at Stainer and Bell. And also I'm working on my first opera. That's my sort of long-term project.
In your spare time, that's right. Go on. What's the theme of the opera, Kristina? Can you give us a synopsis or a précis of what the opera will be showing and saying?
Yes, of course. So it's called Penelope, and it's about the Greek myth, and it's sort of a sort of feminist retelling of the Greek myth, and it was inspired by Caroline Duffy's poem of the same title, from a collection of poems called The World's Wife, where she sort of retells a male narrative through a female, there are either a wife's point of view or a female character's point of view. And we are not entirely sure exactly how we're going to do this, because we're still looking for a librettist. So if any librettists are listening, please contact me. But the idea is to have the narrative of Penelope's life, and then with that have either a 21st century parallel life, or something taken from different centuries, you know, just trying to say that our experience is sort of universal as humans, and that got very philosophical, sorry. So that's the main sort of idea behind the opera.
It sounds in the tradition of opera that it's making fundamental inquiry and statement about where we are in the world. Amazing. Well, good luck with all that. I was going to say, just going back to the commissions you've just referenced there, National Youth Choirs. I mean, we're proud to be a sponsor of them and the Fellow Programme, as you know. But also BBC singers, working with ensembles, I suppose, at the top of their game, really professional, great stages and hopeful broadcast as well. And say something a little bit about the interaction of a composer and performers at that level. You walk in on the first rehearsal. What's the relationship there in a rehearsal leading towards performance?
That's such a good question, and I think it very much depends on the specific group of people.
Yeah.
But generally, I try to operate from a place of respect for the musicians, and generally, I've been very lucky in having wonderful ensembles that I've worked with, who've also respected my music. And in an ideal scenario, which happens, it does happen quite often with. Especially with ensembles of such a caliber, everyone works together to create the experience for our audiences, because that's ultimately what it's all about. It's about communicating with the people who come and attend those events.
Yep.
But it can be sometimes when you're starting out as a composer, it can be a bit of a daunting experience, because I think we all do doubt ourselves to a certain degree. So I think, since we're having a completely honest conversation about sort of some of the sides to being a composer, which are perhaps not as wonderful all the time, you do sometimes sort of doubt yourself, and you try to you try to make sure that you are doing the right thing and so on. But being a composer means you are creating something new, and sometimes you do have to take some risks. But I think as long as you are honest with the musicians, and you are in a supportive environment, it can be a very good experience.
Yep, no, absolutely. I mean, thanks for your honesty around that, and that striving for that collaboration between performer and composer is what I've heard you describing there. Absolutely. Now, look, Kristina, we've really enjoyed working so far with you on the Mentor program. This is the first time that ABRSM have run the program, and we're thoroughly enjoying and learning from it ourselves. Very much as a reminder that this is about us broadening and extending the network of musicians, composers, and arrangers that we work with when we commission music for our syllabuses. But could you tell us a little bit about your experiences so far, and anything perhaps that you found surprising or challenging in the tasks that we've set you to do?
Oh, well, it's been absolutely brilliant, and we've learned so much about the process of writing music for education, which has been wonderful for me, because it's a big passion of mine. Yep. I've especially loved getting to know how the commissioning process works. So that is absolutely brilliant for a composer who's interested to get into this side of composition. I've loved learning more about the administrative side. It's a big organization with many departments, so it's been really interesting to explore that, and also meet some of the greatest professionals, composers, teachers who are in the industry, and learn from their experience. So it's been a really wonderful experience in the last 3 months.
Great. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And just, I mean, I think, I think, we've talked about this a couple of times before, this idea of many ways, we set you the task of writing a grade 1 piano piece, I think was one of the first things we said. And in many ways, you could look at that and think there are quite a few restrictions around what we're giving you to do there. It has to be in a certain key, a certain length, certain note ranges and intervals that we would express an idea ideally would like you to use. So do you see that as a restriction, Kristina, or is it not a restriction at all? It's a fun challenge. I mean, how does that work when that lands on your desk?
It's definitely been a challenge, but I would say it's been a really fun challenge. I've absolutely loved it. And I just had so many different ideas pop up, and I kept thinking, is this appropriate for the level at which I'm working? And, constantly checking the guidelines, because for those of you who are watching, the guidelines, there's so many different things that you need to think about. And it is actually not an easy thing to write for, let's say, a grade 1 level, you know, a beginner pianist. You do have to think about so many different things. And one of the questions that was constantly on my mind was, how would someone who's just starting as a pianist perceive this music? Is it going to be fun for them? Is there something that they can take with them? And I thought back to my experience, the early experiences, what I remember from them anyway. And some music came back to me, some piano exercises, and a piece that I learned called Tarantella. I don't even remember the name of the composer actually, but I remember the music. It's just ingrained in me. And that's something that I'm trying to achieve in the music that I've written so far.
Great. And just to put you on the spot, but I know we know each other well enough to do this. If there was any kind of commission that you would like to get from ABRSM to write a piece, what would it be for? What instrument, what level, and you know, just throw it back our way. What would you like to do?
Oh, that's a great question. I would absolutely, I would love any grade level, any instrument, but I think probably I would be inclined to, you know, write for the piano. Mm-hmm. That would be my first sort of immediate response. Having said that, I'd absolutely love to work with other instruments as well. But having written for grade 1 piano, I'd love to now explore the other perhaps side of the range, say grade 7 or grade 8 piano, and think about how to write for that, you know, for that specific task.
Right. And one thing I guess, you know, that we're really interested in as an organization is remembering we're a global organization. ABRSM operates in 93 countries around the world, and any piece that you might write, whether it's grade 1 or grade 7, is going to be picked up by young people or people of all ages actually in any of those 93 countries. I'm really interested as a composer about, you know, in our world now where so much music is accessible, isn't it? At the press of a button, you can access music from anywhere within the world. Traditional music, contemporary music. Do you think there's a role for ABRSM and its composers to reflect the music of different parts of the world, and how might that come about?
Absolutely. I think I'm definitely for being inspired and influenced, you know, by all sorts of different cultures, different experiences. So I think that I don't really view it as a sort of vanity exercise in that, you know, if you write music, then it will go global and so on. I try to view it as more of an opportunity to touch people's lives and perhaps to communicate with different people. And I think everyone perhaps has a different, have different preferences towards the music that they like to perform, like to practice. So I think the more variety you give the learners, the more chances you have that people can identify with the music and they can perhaps come to love some of the music that they perform. Yep. So I think, you know, when you give people a narrow choice of what to perform, I'm not speaking about any exam boards, just hypothetically, then you know, the more choices we have, the better it is, I think. The more interested we will become, I think, in music.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the world of choice is really good. And I think that sense of respecting different cultures and communities for what is similar, as well as what we recognize as being different, is also really powerful. I think music's got a real connecting power between communities and cultures that is unspoken, but is very present. You know, we can bring people from different communities and cultures together through music. Yes, you know, and I am being ambitious about that. You know, I love the idea of people in different countries around the world playing a single piece of music, but they're playing it within very different contexts and cultures. And what can we share and inspire one another through as a result of that?
Absolutely.
So, Kristina, so final question from me. Someone's watching and listening to this, and they've made it to this point in the film, and they think, I like the idea of being a composer. I like the idea of making and shaping my own music. What advice would you give to them?
I would say try to stay true to whatever you would like to explore as a composer, because it's easy to be pushed in different directions. But ultimately, earlier on in our conversation, we mentioned listening to music, discovering music that makes you really excited, keeps you up at night, and then use those experiences. Perhaps you can start by modeling some of that music, and writing music based on those pieces that you've heard or played. And I would say just, be true to yourself ultimately, because it can be quite difficult to do that, especially when you write a composition. It's sort of like your baby, and you feel quite connected to it. And sometimes people might like it, some people might not like it. So it's also trying not to taking any constructive feedback, of course, but also being resilient and just allowing yourself to keep going with it. I would say that's the advice I would like to give to myself, as well as anyone that's listening.
That's great. Thanks very much for those kind of, inspiring words there. Being resilient, being true to yourself, really important, and as well as respecting music that's already been listening and worked on, and what you can learn from that. Kristina, thanks so much for your words there and inspirational advice to any budding composers. Really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to hearing much more of your music and to working with you as we continue the Mentor program. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for inviting me once again. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.